This event today is being held in partnership with the Classical Association in Northern Ireland, otherwise known as CANI. And I'm delighted to welcome our speaker here today, Dr. Peter Crawford, to talk to us on the topic of the Roman presence in Ireland. And this is our second event with CANI. We had an opening event in November when we had Lynn Gordon talking about Virgil and Heaney, and that was terrific. And as I say, we are hoping to run regular events with CANI. So if you are interested in that area, keep an eye on our programme and on our website. I'm delighted to be able to welcome John Curran, who sits on the board of CANI, and in just a few minutes he's going to say a few words about the work of the organisation. But I don't want to be jumping up and down off the stage, so John is going to speak for a few minutes, and then our speaker Peter is going to talk for about 45 minutes, and then there'll be time for questions at the end. I'm just going to introduce our speaker before I pass on to John. So Peter was born and raised and lives in Ballymoney in County Antrim. He has a PhD in ancient history at Queen's University. He's taught at Queen's University and at University College London. He's the editor of Late Antique Books, and he is a librarian in Dalriada School. So huge amount of experience there. He is widely published. He has books on various late Roman emperors, Heraclius, Constantius, I should check my pronunciation of these before I started, Justinian, and a forthcoming work on Leo III. He's also got numerous popular academic articles on Roman interaction with Ireland, as well as aspects of Roman military, battles, barbarians, raiders. Sounds absolutely fascinating, and I'm so looking forward to the talk. So I'll just have John first, and then Peter's going to get started. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Patsy. Like the representatives of the Linden Hall Library, we in the Classical Association in Northern Ireland are delighted to see such rich fruit being born from our collaboration with the library. We're really delighted at how this is working. Just very briefly to say that the association exists to promote knowledge of the history, the culture, the languages of the ancient Greco-Roman world. We have ambitious aims for communicating the importance of these cultures to the broader public. We support schools as well, and we're very interested in attracting new members. For a very modest subscription, you can become a member and enjoy our programme of events every year. I'll have more details down at the back there at the door, where I'll also be selling some very reasonably priced books as well. Okay, so without any further ado, I'll hand over to our expert speaker, the most prolific author on late antique history in this island today. So delighted to welcome Peter.
Thank you to Patsy, thank you to John for stitching me up there. I'm now going to really have to work my socks off. I've always been interested in Roman history, various areas, Greek history as well, but as I was telling a story earlier, I accidentally stumbled upon the existence of a Roman silver coin find in Coleraine, about 6-7 miles from where I live, and just happened to be leafing through the back of a textbook, as you do when you're looking for some inspiration, and just happened to notice Coleraine in a Roman history book, and I thought, what's Coleraine doing in a Roman history book? And it turns out there is a massive Roman find of silver in Coleraine. It was made in the 1850s, and that's sort of the focus of today. Is I'm going to look at this coin hoard, but actually in the process of looking at this coin hoard, we're going to ask the question of why is it there? Why is it 3 miles from the Bann River when the Romans clearly never conquered Ireland? But we're going to see the question of the Romans were most definitely in Ireland in some way, shape or form. And this is the way we're going to go about it. Since sort of finding out about this coin hoard, as I say, I've mentioned some of my academic articles. I had a joint talk with Raoul McLaughlin, he's here as well. I had the great honour of giving a public talk on this in Coleraine Town Hall itself so literally almost on its doorstep, and also some academic articles and non-academic articles as well. But it's always fantastic to find another audience for what is a fascinating and incredibly important subject in presenting Ireland in what I would consider its true position in the ancient world, and specifically within Rome's orbit. Despite an ever-expanding wealth of information on the late 4th and early 5th century, Hiberno-Roman relations and a surge in archaeological data in the last 25 years, the Coleraine Hoard, it's also known as the Ballinrees Hoard, and probably more accurately, the Ballinrees Hoard, it remains the crown jewel of Roman material found so far in Ireland, hence again why I'm going to focus on it. But to say how it came to be, say 3 miles from the Bann River, I'm going to try and elucidate on that, but I warn you all now, there are no concrete conclusions about any of this because it's not written about anywhere, so we're sort of guessing as we go. But in the process, we highlight sort of the various aspects of what Roman relations with Ireland were. So we start off with a couple of maps, one specific map. For a people who never came to Ireland, the Romans knew quite a lot about this island. Indeed, the 2nd century world map of Claudius Ptolemy included Ireland. This is it on the left. And when you look more closely at an outline of Ireland, as you can see it's superimposed on here, the shape is there. It is. He did have information about what the island of Ireland actually looked like, and also some of the settlements. So Ptolemy must have had access to reports from traders, maybe some military reconnaissance, and probably from the inhabitants of Ireland as well. These are the kind of detail we get that maybe we wouldn't have got any other way. The Roman presence in Britain meant that for 3 centuries their ships passed within only a few miles of the Irish coast. It would be very un-Roman to not investigate that island, sort of this who lived just over the garden fence. The Romans are not going to see 12 miles, because that's its narrowest of the Irish Sea. They're going to come and look and see if anything's worth conquering or at least exploiting. This knowledge of Ireland and the Roman attitude towards potential conquest can be seen in Tacitus's Agricola, say a 1st century work, where the eponymous governor of Britain seems to have investigated or even planned some kind of armed intervention in Ireland, even if it was not to come to pass. Or at the very least, he was supremely confident in Rome's ability to conquer Ireland. You can see here, he says it would just take a single legion and a few auxiliaries to conquer and to occupy Ireland. He's probably not wrong. I mean, a legion is 6,000 men at the most, and when he says a few auxiliaries, what he probably means is the same number again. So he's possibly landing an army of about 12 to 15,000. He thinks that'll conquer the island of Ireland. He's probably not wrong in this period. Whether he could have held on to it is a different kettle of fish. Such interaction with the Irish Sea means that there are dozens, even hundreds of Roman finds in Ireland. And while this talk focuses on the Coleraine Hoard specifically, it should not be thought of as happening in isolation. Indeed, the area of the north coast of Northern Ireland in which the Coleraine Hoard was found had already seen some sizable finds of Roman silver coins even before its discovery in 1854. In 1827, we have the McKinley Hoard of 300 silver coins found at Flower Hill, which is the one here, just a standing stone at Flower Hill. And then we have the Quig Hoard of 500 silver coins being unearthed in Fay Hill in Tonduff, at the top of the map in 1830. This background then leads us to a newspaper report in April 1854. It's just covered up there by but we have the Coleraine Chronicle of April 1854. I'm not going to go through it in detail because I'm going to spend a lot of this talk saying that some of it is wrong. So it's sort of, I'm going to lead you down the garden path. There are a few mistakes in this report, although it must be said again, I'm not being critical of the Chronicle for that, because the Coleraine Chronicle now is very much a local paper. At this time in 1854, not only is photography only in its very infancy, but such local newspapers are actually papers of global news. They're not about local news, they're about global news. So in the mid-1850s, the Chronicle spends an awful lot of its time talking about the Crimean War, which is to be expected. So this sort of little thing that's happening in a field up near McCosquin is not necessarily something that they're going to spend a massive amount of time on or resources on. Luckily though, inquiries were made and they revealed some of these inaccuracies. First off, the hoard was not found in a ditch. Rather, it was found by a labourer who uncovered it whilst digging in a field nowhere near existing divisions. Now this doesn't sound particularly important, but actually it's vitally important. Because it's not found in an existing ditch division, it means it was buried specifically, and it was also buried a lot earlier than the ditch divisions. The ditch divisions will be maybe 500 years later than the actual burying of the hoard. So it's actually been buried purposefully in a specific position in a field, not actually in a ditch several hundred years later. Say ditch divisions are far later development than the 5th century. The hoard is also not found accidentally dropped in an urn just below the surface, but was buried purposefully in a leather bag, and the leather bag had since disintegrated. Now, this is important because it shows that it's been purposefully buried, and that means if you're talking modern connotations, it changes it to being treasure. This is something that has been purposefully buried that somebody's going to go back and get again. So actually, it belongs to the state. that's the sort of the rules that are implied here. But actually, the fact that it's been buried purposefully gives us another hint of what happened. Why was it there? It's been purposefully buried for a reason. The makeup of the hoard. The makeup of the hoard is also misreported. The total of coins of 1,937 would later be revised to 1,506. But even this figure is far from definitive. A further 195 coins would be added to give a number of 1,701, but there's a lack of information about what this later discovery actually is. Again, we're sort of in the very early ages of proper cataloguing of these things. It's really a sort of a later 18th or later 19th century development, so we're sort of in the 1850s, so for us to get any information is a real bonus. Where they haven't actually sort of the science of archaeological discovery hasn't quite reached its maturity yet. We're not even sure if this extra 195 is the same hoard or an extra hoard or whatever, because we just don't have the information for it. Looking at it though, by 1937, a total of 1,483 has sort of been crystallised as what made up the Coleraine Hoard. We have 731 that are identifiable and 751 unidentifiable siliqua. Now the siliqua, it's sort of, kind of wish I brought one of them with me. These coins are not very big. This is a wee tiny, maybe a 5p coin that we're dealing with here. We're not dealing with a big brutal thing, but it is solid silver. Keen mathematicians will tell you that I have 731 and 751 doesn't add up to 1483. That's because there is one extra coin that is a Migliarense, which is a lot bigger. It is a much thicker coin. I say we will look at that in a wee bit more detail because it is more important. The sort of definitive idea of the Coleraine Hoard appears in the Roman imperial coinage, a great vast tome of looking at Roman coins. And it details 1483. Now again, you can see there's some highlighted items here. That's because even the great Roman imperial coinage gets its sums wrong. You can't quite see here because of the covering up for the portal. But the top line says that for Constantius II there were 8 and 7 and 11 coins in various mints, and then adds that up to get to 25, and actually it's 26. So they've got their sums wrong. It might be a simple arithmetic error. This can highlight how difficult identifying coins can be. Emperors can look alike. They can have similar names, and they can have similar imperial mint marks. So there can also be forgeries and misstamping. So again, we're not going to pile in on the Roman imperial coinage for getting this wrong. It's a very easy mistake to make, and actually you can dissect some of these figures and find where some of the changes have been made to actually find that, because there's things, even the things in the British Museum were recatalogued at a later date to prove they were different coins. The biggest problem, though, with the Coleraine Hoard is that a significant number of the coins are in poor condition. On top of 1400 years of degradation, 50% of the coins suffer from what is called clipping. This was a practice of removing the edges of precious metals, so gold or silver coins, but passing them off as their original weight, because these are precious metal coins. Some coins are so heavily clipped, as some of these examples here, that you cannot see the legend. The writing around the outside is gone, and so is the mint marks. We don't know where the coins are from. We don't know who they're of or where they're from. And that's a real disappointment. The legacy of attempts to counter this practice can be seen in your own pockets. The modern coins will have a raised rim and a milled edge, and maybe both, to stop people from clipping coins, even though the coin now is not actually worth anything. The coin now is a token rather than actually being made of precious metal. Such clipping was particularly widespread in the late 4th and early 5th century, and particularly in Roman Britain. Anything up to 99% of coin hoards would have this kind of serious clipping going on. It's so widespread that it's been suggested that it's actually an official act, that actually as coins decline in size, officially they're actually taking older coins and clipping them down to meet the new standard weight. It's so prevalent and so widespread. Again, that's a suggestion without necessarily much actual backing. Now for some dates. We're actually going to try and date the Coleraine Hoard. This is the earliest coin that is in the hoard. Now, it's the earliest dateable coin. There might be other ones that are slightly earlier. But this is a coin of Constantius II. It was minted in Arles in France, and between the years 353, 355. The latest emperor is Honorius, who reigned until 423, although none of his surviving coins have been firmly dated until after 402. Aside from this, this is interesting because it's almost certainly a forgery, but an antique forgery, not a recent addition. It's an antique forgery. The reason I say that is because the mint marks, we have similar coins of Honorius minted in Milan, in Rome, and Ravenna, and those are from the 420s. But this coin is stamped TRPS, which puts it in Trier in France, and no other coin of this type is known. Now you might think straight away, well, that's fantastic. No other coin, it means it's unique, it means it's really rare. Most of the time for numismatists, uniqueness is a bad thing because it doesn't fit with what they know, and it doesn't fit with what they know, it's more likely that it's fake or a forgery of some sort. Now that doesn't mean that uniqueness can't be a good thing. We've seen there have been coins on the news recently about Roman emperors who didn't know what we didn't know about. There's only one of them. Does that mean it's unique or it's real? That's where the science of numismatists come in. But the likelihood then this is a forgery of the early 5th century, and doesn't actually represent anything, doesn't tell us anything about the Coleraine Hoard. This leaves then these three coins as probably the latest parts of the Coleraine Hoard. They're minted in Lyon in France between 407 and 408, and they're of the British Emperor Constantine III, which of course tells us that the hoard cannot have been buried before 407, 408. So that's sort of our earliest late date, if that makes sense. It could be far later, but say factoring in the time it takes for these coins to travel across the empire, the most frequent dates given for the burying of the Coleraine Hoard are between 420 and 425. However, as we saw with Constantius coin, has been in circulation for at least 50 years, if not more. It could be far later. So anything up to 430s, 440s for the Coleraine Hoard is not out of the way. Coincidentally, there being any coins of Constantine III, a 5th century British usurper, as to the rarity of the Coleraine Hoard. There's almost no other British hoards that have coins of Constantine III in them. So these, again, as to the rarity of this find. Even rarer still is this coin, the one non-silica in the Roman Hoard. It is of Jovian, an emperor who only reigned for 8 months and only reigned in the east. When I say only reigned, he was only in the east for those 8 months. The coin itself was minted in Antioch, which is now in Turkey. So for this coin to get to Britain, tells you that the interaction with the Roman world is there. It's an important addition. The way I've been talking so far, you'd be forgiven for thinking that the Coleraine Hoard is only made up of coins, but that's not the case. There was an awful lot of other things as well, what's called hacksilver, silver that's been hacked up for various reasons. There were 57 pieces of silver plate, silver ingots, dish rims, and other fragments. 3 of these were brought together to remake the bowl, which is on display in the British Museum. If we link back to the Coleraine Chronicle, there is no horse armour, but there are some bits like this. You can understand maybe where they got the idea from. This is sort of decorative, or maybe decorative armour, so potentially an understandable mistake. Some of these pieces are were either heavily tarnished or actually were gilded with gold, so again they're even more valuable. And you can see from this, some of the things that were cleaned in the British Museum, you can see this is what they're actually tarnished at the top and cleaned at the bottom. So again, it's good quality silver. It might suggest that these are all high purity, but actually it's the dish rims that are the highest purity after the coins. The coins themselves are 93, 94% pure. They are very good late Roman coins. These are 92, and I think actually the ingot, which is supposed to be the best, is actually probably the worst. So again, we've raised some questions about where a lot of this is coming from. It is entirely possible that these silver pieces were intentionally hacked up to correspond to weights and measures for distribution. That's why a lot of the initial idea is they were hacked up to give out to raiders, but actually they all seem to end up at quite the same weight. So it seems like it's a far less rushed move rather than say for raiders. Just a little brief aside, for artistic aspects of the decoration of the silver pieces, I'm no expert, but some of the people who claim to be experts were unimpressed by what the decoration of a lot of these pieces were. I think one man, T.D. Kendrick, said they were very ordinary and even insipid. I don't know if I agree. Some of it's not great, but some of it's actually, like this, is very intricate, and that sort of Romano-British art is going to influence Saxon and Irish art for centuries to come. This is what Irish art is going to actually become. We're getting something very important from some of these pieces. Admittedly, again, it's a little rustic, but I would argue it still has its praises. Admittedly, the ingots most of them are largely uninteresting because they're literally just lumps of silver. The battle axes, as you can see, there's a battle axe that was mentioned in the Coleraine Chronicle, is another misidentification. But then this ingot is what's called a double axe head, so I mean, it wasn't far off, but it's made of silver, so it's not a battle axe. Another understandable error. The 2 accent types do bear inscriptions, and this is where we start to see some of the interest. We have, yes, this one. You can see we have EXOF PATRICI, which is regarded as ex officina Patricii, which means from the workshop of Patricius. Now, completely glossing over a very good 5th century Roman name in Patrick. This Patricius was almost certainly an owner or financier of a workshop that was producing these ingots. So again, it's a very nice addition to find that a Roman silver ingot that was found in Northern Ireland has Patrick's name on it. It just you can imagine it tickled people when they first saw it. We also have this one, which has Cur Missi, C-U-R-M-I-S-S-I. The C-U-R appears on other ingots and is seen as an official title, either means curatoris or procurator. The Missi we're not sure of, because people seem to think it means missionem, which would mean the whole thing means the issue of a procurator, which again is just showing you where it's coming from. But missi doesn't appear in any other ingots like this. It's something to the guess. That said, some irregularity in the lettering and the absence of definite official formulae, together with impurities in the silver, as I mentioned, could suggest this is a counterfeit operation. This is actually not official. But even in imperial workshops, the fineness of silver and the quality of lettering are not uniform. Even the Romans themselves were not always fantastic at their minting of things. Such ingots are probably at worst semi-official, so somebody would be making them and then the state would just say, yeah, well, that'll do, that'll be fine for us. It's maybe produced in private workshops and then recognised as official to be of use, as well as those struck in imperial mints. With that brief overview of what the Coleraine Hoard was made of, we can now look at some of the ideas of why. Why is it in Northern Ireland? Why is there a big lump of Roman silver in Northern Ireland? As I mentioned already, in a purely geographical sense, it's hardly surprising that Roman material would end up in Ireland, especially given the sheer extent of Roman megalomania and the empire's vast trading network, which you can see just a small snippet of here. This is just the Mediterranean part of it, the intersection between Europe and Asia and North Africa. The Arabian Peninsula, Central Africa, the Indian subcontinent, and even the farther east, were not out of reach of Roman trade. You find Roman coins in Japan, that kind of thing. It's just all over the place. For such a sophisticated trade network, the Irish Sea would be no obstacle. As I mentioned, it's 12 miles at its narrowest. You can stand on either side of it and see. Even on a per day, you can see Scotland from Northern Ireland and vice versa. And while overt evidence of their physical presence in Ireland might be expected, or at least more of it, there is no doubt that trading connections between Ireland, Britain, and Western Europe were of long standing. As we've seen, Tacitus and Ptolemy got information about Irish ports from somewhere, while the presence of coins as far east as Turkey and the Coleraine Hoard highlights the links, as I already mentioned. One of the more prominent reasons given for the Romans not conquering Ireland, was that the island was of little value. Also the reason they say about Germany and they say about Scotland. However, a brief look at the natural resources of this island shows that there were things available to the Romans. Above manpower and trees, for want of a better word, there are gold deposits, silver deposits, lead, copper, zinc, rock salt, a lot of sand in Northern Ireland that would have been useful. This suggests that the Romans didn't conquer Ireland because it wasn't useful. They probably could just get it by exploiting it through trade. While none of these resources are in the immediate vicinity of Coleraine, the presence of the Bann River as a waterway could have seen Roman traders pass through the vicinity, which on top of the proximity of the great British mainland would explain the presence of Roman finds along the north coast. The Coleraine Hoard is comprised only of silver, and I will come back to this point a couple of times because I think it disqualifies an awful lot of suggestions about what it's made of. The fact that it's only silver suggests that it's unlikely to be the savings of a merchant. It's unlikely to be a miser or a monastery or even a robber or a raider. Why would he just have silver? If he was robbing somewhere, he would steal everything. That's one of the reasons. One of the things I'll come back to when I get to a different idea. Surely there will be other precious materials. It's also been suggested that the Coleraine Hoard was a stash of a silversmith who intended to reuse it to make high status items for his chieftain. Whether the Irish of the early 5th century had the ability to do this, up in the air. I would say some of them did. They've seen things like the Brighter Hoard, which is clearly made in Ireland, is fantastic. So somebody knew how to work in precious metals. But it probably isn't widespread, which, if it is, means the Coleraine Hoard's even more rare than we would like to think. While trade no doubt brought Roman material to these islands, Roman trade in the Irish Sea was in decline by the period of the Coleraine Hoard in the early 5th century. So we might have to look elsewhere for an explanation for its presence. The Coleraine Hoard could be a product of Irish raids across the Irish Sea on various parts of the British mainland. The hacksilver could have been collected in a rush, either by raiders or by civilians desperate to pay them off. Being from a period of nearly 60 years, the coins could have been a gradual gather rather than one big sort of stealing on one point, either gradually brought together in Britain itself or gradually accumulated from raids in Ireland. The primary sources certainly record raids on Britain throughout the period of the 4th and 5th century, but while Irish involvement has been proposed for several earlier Constantinian raids, it was not until 360 that we got our first proper documented Irish incursion. The savage tribes of the Scotti are the Irish at this point, joined the Picts in making life miserable for the people of Roman Britain, leading to the Emperor Julian sending an army from Gaul to deal with them in Britain. Irish raiders are also involved in the so-called Barbarian Conspiracy of 367, reputedly a series of barbarian attacks on Britain, although there's little archaeological evidence and the historical record is infected with propagandist invention. We see ideas that the Irish were driven back to their marshlands, weeping at the mounds of dead Scots, this sort of poetic infection of the record. Unfortunately, we haven't got great historical sources for the late 4th century, particularly after Ammianus stopped writing. So the historicity of some of the people that we know from this period, whether it's Niall of the Nine Hostages or Vortigern or even St. Patrick himself, it becomes difficult to define their actual history. It's something we're sort of always wary of. St. Patrick in particular, all kinds of arguments about him, when, who he was. Let's say this, certainly the time frames is problematic. That is not to say there was not raiding of Britain after 367. Successful campaigning against Pictish and Irish incursions in 381 may have led to the elevation of the Emperor Magnus Maximus, and also before 417, we know that the Isle of Man had been conquered by the Irish, by the Scotti specifically. So there was something, they were still campaigning in the Irish Sea. But again, I come back to the point that I've made already. There is one significant obstacle to accepting that raiding is the reason for the Coleraine Hoard, and that's it's made up of silver. It's made up of only silver. But these raiders have just stolen all the silver. They've not taken any gold or any jewellery, anything else. It seems unlikely. It would be a very pernickety raider who would only take silver at this time. Now, we'll see there's a reason why. The Vikings in particular also took a lot of silver because it was used as currency rather than just for its worth. More recently, therefore, we have the Boundaries find being viewed as a result of something far greater cooperation between Ireland and Rome. It is now seen by a lot of people, including myself, as a payment to the Irish in some form. Now, this could be different forms. I'm saying I'm going to look at one in order. Perhaps the most surprising is that it's a payment for the services of Irish soldiers in the Roman army. This is something that people haven't really thought about, but this fits into the long-established Roman policy of employing non-Romans to fight their wars for them. Indeed, the Notitia Dignitatum, a large governmental list of thousands of offices and units within the Roman administration, records 4 separate units called Attacoti, serving in regular field forces. It's not completely certain who the Attacoti were, but when they do appear in the historical sources, they're always linked to the Scotti. So the chances are that these are two peoples that come from the same place. So the Attacoti are probably of Irish origin. This would then see the Notitia reflect a considerable Irish presence in the Roman army. We have the Honori Attacoti Seniores, we have the Honori Attacoti Juniores, the Attacoti Juniores Gonici, all of which served in Gaul and in Italy. While we have the Attacoti were found serving in the Balkans, in the same sort of what is now northern Greece. And there we get two funerary inscriptions of Attacoti men who have fought and died in the Balkans for the Roman army. And these are not just semi-organised Irish rabble serving Rome. All of these units are what are called auxilia palatini. These are the best units in the Roman army. So the Irish were not just being used as total cannon fodder, they were actually being put into good units. Nor should this be viewed as the entire presence of the Irish in the Roman army. Such units were served in pairs. So, as I mentioned, you can see here, we've got the seniores and the juniores. We've got a juniores by itself. There should be a seniores as well. So either there was more and it was destroyed, or some days left it out. And also, it doesn't take into account individual Irishmen serving in other units. So there was quite possibly a decent Irish presence in the Roman army. But we must be careful not to overreach here. Just because a unit is called Attacoti does not mean that there were Irish still serving in it at the time it's recorded on the Latitia. This unit, particularly this unit here, the Attacoti, could have been in the Balkans for 40 years by the time it's recorded in the Latitia. So there's a good chance that an awful lot of the Irish who were originally in it are not serving in it anymore, and it would have just been locals. This happens with all kinds of Roman units. You see, the unit actually becomes like a name rather than actually meaning sort of, I suppose, even modern armies when you see regions, where it's originally raised doesn't necessarily mean that people are still all from Warwickshire or whatever, that sort of idea. They're not all from Warwickshire, they're from other parts of the country. And again, enthusiasm can lead to some unnecessary leaps as well. Let's say a couple of things here. Jumping back to the map of Ptolemy, we can find the Averni, which is in it's just behind our Burn Fort there. It's usually seen as the precursor for what is Cashel in Munster. And in Cashel, people see the name, or the Latin name Castellum, named Castle, or Fort, while there is an Ogham stone found at Burn Fort, which might contain the Latin Sagittarii, which means archer. And this with the Coleraine Hoard, which is in Limerick as well, sort of a sister hoard to Coleraine. It is tempting to see some kind of Roman influence in Munster at this point. But to then make the leap, as some do, that the handful of units in the Roman army listed as Iberi are being from this Iverni tribe is wishful thinking. The Iberi are either Spanish or Georgians, because the Iberians, the Iberian Peninsula, we know as, but also we have Iberia, which is now modern Georgia. And so we can't get overexcited about looking for Irish in the Roman army. They are there, but we can't go too far. Unfortunately, while the chance to fight and a steady wage could see Irishmen volunteer, and defeated raiders could be forcibly enrolled, there is little information about when or how these men were recruited. It's just not something that the Romans really wrote down. Paying their Irish neighbours to fight for them in the Roman army was just one of the Roman policies that could be the reason for viewing the Coleraine Hoard as a governmental payment. The Romans may have paid Irish tribes not to fight, sort of almost the exact opposite. Instead, using them to keep the peace at a local level and to protect Roman interests beyond the frontiers. Such divide and rule has been put forward as the reason for other silver hoards from this period, specifically Trapean law, which another massive silver hoard found near Edinburgh. This hill fort was the main centre of a tribe called the Volodini, a tribe who may have been paid to maintain the peace. It doesn't look like proceeds of a raid. It looks like something they've been given. So maybe they've been paid. The extent of Irish raiding, during the second half of the 4th century would make it unsurprising to find the Romans reaching out to local leaders in Ireland with a willingness to pay those tribesmen off, saying, just giving them money just to keep everybody at home. You don't need to raid this year. We'll pay you in advance, sort of ideas. And also, while you're at it, make sure that your neighbours don't go as well. So it's a policing force, buying your own local policing force for the Romans. Such an idea is not just found in Britain. Hoards found along the Rhine may also be payments to Germanic tribes to keep the peace. One reasonably recent hoard was found in Holland, which looks like it has some of the hacksilver, sort of from similar to Coleraine. We also have a beaded rim decoration and even possible horse motif. This hoard was also found in a field near a river, and its silver had been hacked up, seemingly to correspond to Roman weights. So again, we might be seeing again a sister. We might be seeing something similar in that regard. Such a policy may have made it into the pages of the Notitia Dignitatum. The idea that the state collected and confiscated silverware, cut it down into official weights, and bagged it or had local workshops melted down into ingots, paid soldiers, both regular and allied. This is a recreated page from Notitia Dignitatum that shows the wares of the official responsible for such payments, the Largicones. He has silver bowls filled with gold coins, silver plates, silver-rimmed caskets, and bags of hacksilver and coins. So again, we might be seeing something else. How tribal leaders distributed these payments may also tell us something about Coleraine. It might be expected that chieftains would dole out such payments at their tribal capitals like Cashel or Umain-Macha, but the position of Coleraine along the Bann, the entrance to the waterways of the north of Ireland, also made it a natural meeting place. Perhaps the most intriguing part of such a proposed meeting for the distribution of Roman payment is the idea that if an individual was not present to receive their share, it would be buried nearby, and a marker left to indicate its location for future retrieval. So maybe somebody has been left for somebody and they've never turned up or couldn't find it. That's maybe what we have here. The Romans may not have been paying the Irish to fight for them or as part of a system of defensive alliances. They may instead have been paying the Irish due to the very success of the Irish raiding and military activities, again, slight difference from the defensive ideas. This map shows that by the late 4th century, Irish raids were giving way to something more permanent, particularly in Wales. There had been a significant influence on local archaeology, linguistics, and literature. Places like, I can't quite see it there, but the Lane Peninsula in northern Wales takes its name from Leinster. It's the same word, they are the same people. Also Dyfed, which might be from the Desi of Munster. So we have Irish settlements in Wales in what would be late Roman Britain. It might be expected that these are footholds that are established violently, but actually when you look at their archaeology, they appear somewhat peaceful. This is potentially marking these as migrations rather than invasions. It could be due to limited Romanisation in Wales that we see this sort of flag of fighting, but the organisation of some of these settlements has given rise to the idea that they received some Roman input. The Romans were involved in settling some of these people, so perhaps this is something of a officially sanctioned tribal protectorate. They're bringing people, maybe bringing land back into circulation, that sort of idea. They won't do it all over the place all the time. While the exact date or origin of these settlements cannot be fully established, they provided another conduit for Roman silver to end up in Ireland, either as ransom, spoils, or profit from their new lands. The investigation then into the circumstances of such Roman material in Ireland is vital to our understanding of Romano-Irish relations. The Irish settlements in Wales might seem like something new. The scale of such settlements certainly was, but really they could also be seen as just the next step in a development of a long-standing relationship between the Romans and the Irish. The idea that lacking a land border with Rome meant that Ireland was free from Roman influence is no longer a valid approach. We always knew it wasn't, because obviously the church gets here without any kind of sort of land border. And in the same way that those 12 miles could not stop Roman wares finding their way to Ireland, it would not stop Roman influence as well. As part of her long-term success, Rome's ability to project power into unconquered lands. The resultant system of client states not only provided a buffer between the empire and farther Barbican, but also political contacts, networks of trade, sources of manpower. It also spread Roman civilization. And at this point, the church is part of that. Christianity coming to Ireland is part of that spread. And even if the idea of a sort of grand overarching idea of Romanization is now being downplayed somewhat, and much of Roman Ireland still remains invisible, unfortunately, the archaeological record shows that 4th century Ireland was undergoing societal and political changes similar to other frontier zones in this period. Roman influence must have had an effect in that. Perhaps the most important change was the increasing centralisation and foundation of early kingdoms in Leinster and in Munster. While the Romans likely already had ties with such chieftains, the possibility that some of these proto-kings were now exerting greater control over more land would make them even more desirable allies. You could now pay these men, and they would actually be able to do what you were paying them for, looking after people, keeping leaders on the leash, because these men are now individually more powerful. Indeed, the sheer size of hoards such as Coleraine or Trapean Law and the presence of stamped ingots might be evidence of greater political contact. So why would you send an ingot, a stamped ingot, to here if you weren't actually expecting it to be used, coming back to your Roman marketplaces? As a result, Roman material may have become increasingly important to the consolidation of power beyond the frontiers in the British Isles. Scottish sites such as Trapean Law show how control of Roman material can be linked to authority, while St. Patrick, in a famous story, caused offence by refusing jewellery, which might support the notion that such a gift was a means of political allegiance. Sort of this sort of Roman material became sort of almost a symbol of allegiance and of authority. It's also worth noting that these periods of Irish raids, the 360s, the 380s, the early 400s, all coincide with the Romans facing usurpers and Persian War and other barbarian attacks. Perhaps they were forgetting to send them to Ireland, so the Irish decided to hop across to the mainland to claim what they were owed. It might be sort of a catalyst in that way. There's also potential religious dimension, and can't forget it, to some Irish finds in Ireland, Roman finds in Ireland, where there's a long tradition of ritual disposition focused on bogs, rivers, lakes, etc. So could some of the Roman finds be locals or foreign visitors giving offerings to deities, or even reusing such sites to hide treasure? We do see it. Any of you who have been to Newgrange down near Dublin, there are Roman coins found on the top of it because the people knew there was something important there, and used it as a religious site. And they left Roman coins as a gift to the gods. And that's what they were left on the top of Newgrange. The Christian Church would surely be an institution capable of providing large sums of silver, and was active in Ireland in the early 5th century. But there's no evidence that that field in Ballinrees was anything other than a one-off hiding place. There's no sort of hint that there was any sort of ritual deposit going on there. It's not something that's been reused for spiritual devotion. As I warned at the outset, as I come to something near the end, in looking into how the Coleraine Hoard came to be buried just a few miles from the Ban, we are embarking on an unfinished story, and a potentially never to be finished story, unfortunately. Even with the long list of suggestions I've given you for being the result of trade, diplomacy, military pay, refugees, migrants, ransom, and even military expedition, such as the lack of information about Hiberno-Roman relations and the Coleraine Hoard, there is still room for numerous other suggestions on how the Ballinrees silver came to be there. I mentioned that some of these chieftains were becoming more powerful. Could they have been powerful enough to imposing tax? Therefore, somebody is tax dodging by hiding these silver coins. Could it be from the whole of the ship, which somebody suggested? We obviously have history in Ireland for that with the Spanish Armada. Indeed, any number of these ideas and other possibilities could be working together. It might not just be one answer to why the Coleraine Hoard is here. There might be several. all working together. And this probably brings us as close as the truth we might get to. It's probably a mixture of various things happening all at the same time. But in the process of not getting to an answer, we also then get to see the numerous avenues for Roman-Irish interaction. So it's one of the benefit of the Coleraine Hoard in that way. Before I finish off, there is one other lingering question that some of you might have about the Coleraine Hoard in particular. Mentioned bits of it and how much of it there is. One of the questions we asked when I first looked into this is, where is it all? This is such a big, massive Roman find of coins. Where is everything? Only a tenth of the Coleraine coins can be found in the collections of the Ulster and British Museum. The former has 30 and the latter has 83. So where are the other 1,300 coins? Quite frankly, the answer is we don't know. The British Museum catalogue records that their pieces were purchased either from or through James Gilmore, which, if you go back to the Coleraine Chronicle article, was the watchmaker who ended up looking after the silver hoard when it was found. It shows that he retained an interest in the silver hoard after it was sort of catalogued and discovered. And when the Ulster Museum purchased 9 heavily clipped siliqua in the mid-1970s, they were found to be contained in a jewellery box which was marked Gilmore and Son, Coleraine. So it's a good chance that he had some influence in it well after the fact, well after it was discovered. Mr. Gilmore is also said to have kept one half ingot to test for quality, and good chances that half ingot was destroyed in the process. I think maybe they would say that was. But this doesn't account for all the hacksilver. Of the 57 pieces recorded in 1854 by Porter and Carruthers, who were the sort of first cataloguers of the Coleraine Hoard, only 29 are currently in the British Museum. I think there might be one. There's supposed to be maybe 1 or 2 in the Ulster Museum catalogue as well, but we're still 20 or 30 pieces short potentially. His possession of the hoard, his selling to the British Museum, and his profession has led to the suggestion that James Gilmore might have melted down some of the coins and hacksilver or sold them on, as what happened with some of the other Roman silver coin finds in their area. There really is no evidence for this. That's just jumping to a conclusion that he is a silversmith, therefore he must have melted his coins down. We have no sort of backing for that. But again, rather than potentially castigate Mr. Gilmore for what is missing, we must be grateful for the combination of the unnamed field labourer, who he could have kept it for himself. I mean, he just could have just put it in his pockets and walked away. Porter and Carruthers, Gilmore himself, they all combined together to provide a catalogue of value. This is an era, this is from a period in the 1850s when you didn't get these types of catalogue. These are very early in the sort of proper cataloguing of these things. So we actually get to see what was in the Coleraine Hoard. And in the process then, this information allows us to shine a great deal of light on Romano-Irish relations, which we would otherwise not have had. So again, don't think too badly of James Gilmore. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. That was a fantastic story, and with lots of different kinds of endings or possibilities. So, there's a bit of time for questions now. So, does anybody have a question? See a couple of hands at the back. So, I'm going to start from the very back and work my way forward. Okay.
Thank you for an excellent talk. Is there any written evidence of Roman contact or Roman presence in Ireland? You mentioned Tacitus during your talk.
Unfortunately, no. And when we talk about specific, we're talking about the Roman government. So we might have the Roman Church, and that's obviously St. Patrick being sent over. That's maybe as close as we get. But actually, aside from Ptolemy, the Romans don't really record Ireland. We have Tacitus mentions it, and Agricola looking over here saying, "I'll conquer it easily." that's about as far as they go. We get sort of little snippets. Rosius, an early 5th century man, basically tells us things like the Isle of Man has been conquered by the Scots, but with nothing actually about in Ireland itself. It's only really when the Irish encroach on Roman territory that's what we're left with. And again, you can understand why the Romans, if the Romans were so were going to be interested in everybody that was along their frontiers, they would never stop writing, which of course we would have loved. That would have been great. But yeah, we only really see the Irish involved when they're involved in Romans. Now, there's other things I didn't mention them. There's all kinds of sort of trying to inject the Irish into Roman history. A lot of it's false. I mean, there's things like Irish as far back as meeting Egyptians and meeting the time of Christ. But these are things that are added later. Unfortunately, that can't really be believed. So the lack of Roman written story about Ireland is really a big hole that we're sort of that we have to try and fill with archaeology and with connecting to other parts. So there's a big gap from Tacitus all the way to sort of the late 5th century. We're sort of really flailing about, unfortunately. I would really like to have been doing more.
Hi, thanks for your talk. Are there any evidence of physical structures the Romans may have left behind in Ireland?
Well, this is where I can get myself into trouble. Or maybe get into very deep questions. The answer is probably no at the moment. There's almost certainly something somewhere, but we haven't been able to just define it. The biggest one suggested is probably Dromana down in outside Dublin, the island. People look at it and see the Roman playing card fortress, which, if the island itself wasn't largely playing card shaped, I might have a bit more truck with, and maybe suggest that this is the Romans building a trading port in their own inevitable style of being in a playing card shape. There isn't much else, and that's, again, it's an argument from silence though to say that there isn't anything, just because we haven't found it yet. But it's things like Dromana. There's an awful lot of articles about what Dromana is or is not, and it's things like that we are. So I think if I'm out on a limb, Dromana just might be the result of geography rather than the Romans being there. But again, we find Roman style burials in Ireland. Again, does that mean it's a Roman, or does it mean it's somebody who has been influenced by Rome? So we're still sort of, a lot of archaeology has come out recently and is being piled over in several projects. But in terms of an actual nice Roman military camp, not yet, if there ever was one.
We have time for maybe another question, if anyone has all at the back. Oh yes, right to the very back.
Hi Peter, I wondered whether it was maybe worth looking at the evidence, any literary evidence from the Irish point of view rather than from purely the Roman point of view. Because you could imagine if the Romans had sort of come or encroached on Irish territory, someone of the Irish annal writers might have mentioned it.
I think, and I'm speaking from a little bit of ignorance here, a lot of the annal writers start just a bit later. Now, we do have the stories like Niall of the Nine Hostages, which people try and inject into Roman stories, and there is something there, but it might just be there's a big bad over the sea there, and it's sort of people later then sort of rereading into things. I've seen a few suggestions of how this all could have happened, but I think a lot of the Irish stuff is just too late in terms of.
Even as I was asking that, actually something.
I think it's just too late. I think there's some obviously we've got St. Patrick's. St. Patrick's probably as early as it gets for a lot of it. If you actually look at if you take his letters as being actually of the period. Some of the annals, I was looking at it there recently, some of the annals not really written at the time. Not that means anything. It could be a lot of oral history can provide interesting. And I would say there is a Roman-shaped hole in a lot of it as well. again, maybe is it because it's just too early? Say if the Romans had stuck around in Britain for another century, maybe the Irish would have been in more position to talk about it. But again, maybe the Irish talking about Easter, so they're not completely detached in that regard. I will admit a bit of ignorance with regards to the annals, but it is my sort of vague impression that they're just too late. Most of them just too late.
Sorry.
This is I'll take one last question over here, and oh gosh. Go on, put your hands on that.
It's all too interesting.
I don't know how to pronounce this, but was there a myth of an Irish chieftain called Tuatha?
Yes, this is the man, Tuatha Techmar. This is supposedly the man who appeared at the court of the Roman governor I was mentioning, Agricola. Supposedly they talk about, I think he's mentioned, his name not mentioned in the Roman sources, but he is called a Regulus, a little king. Supposedly this man, and connection. It's not definitely Tuatha Techmar, but the connection is made. The annals sort of suggest he was ousted at this point, and then almost seemingly came back again, and his presence at the Roman court of Agricola suggests potentially that Agricola has put him back. That is again a reach. If there's just not enough evidence, there's connections being made that are not completely solid. They might sound logically sound, but we're just again reaching, unfortunately. But yes, that is the little king, the Regulus, who is mentioned, is connected to Tuatha Techmar, which is one of the sort of seemingly clearer connections with the Romans and an Irish chieftain. But again, just not enough written about it.
Thanks very much. Because this man has his hand up, and I'm moving towards the front of the room now. I'll just take that one last minute.
Thank you. In the context of these islands, what is a Roman? Are we talking about folk who've come up from Italy, or are we talking about locals who've acquired Roman citizenship?
Both. Because we're dealing with a large period of time, we're sort of dealing with both. I mean, Tacitus in his period, 1st century, we're looking at the Roman army is still mostly Italian. It is now gradually becoming less Italian because they're looking to Gaul and finding, as you say, as citizenship spreads. As we get to maybe when the Irish fully appear in the Roman record in the 4th century, everyone born in the Roman Empire is a Roman. Every free person, is a Roman citizen from 212. Say when Caracalla wanted to expand his tax base, he just made every freeborn person in the empire a Roman citizen. So we're basically getting both. Agricola, I think Agricola's from Gaul, but he's probably certainly of Italian extraction. So essentially we're getting them all. And
so the locals could have already had connections with the Irish.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they definitely did. I mean, Ireland and Britain are well connected. So we see the sort of the old gods connected between, say, the Isle of Man and Ireland, and there was definitely, again, the 12 miles is not very far. And then the other thing we know of the early Irish is they were seafarers. The brighter hoard, many of you've seen the big massive gold torque. What comes with it is a gold boat. It's a gold rowing boat. And I think early stuff on the Isle of Man again shows connection. So I mean, the Romans weren't inventing a connection with Ireland; it was already there. They also seem to think some of them seem to think it was between France and Spain. So they're not infallible in terms of geography. Somebody seemed to think that Ireland was a nice stopping off point if you're trying to get from Spain to France, which would be quite the detour. But yes, we have the Romans in this case are not just from Rome or from Italy; they are from the Roman Empire. I say that's a gradual thing. You might have noticed the difference. The first Irish, there was an Irishman who first met the first Romans, very Italian, and then by 400 from anywhere. I mean, that's one of the things that actually links into some of these coins. Say these Roman soldiers all over the place. So a Roman soldier must have got that coin from what is now Turkey and taken it all the way across the empire for it to end up in Britain in some way, shape, or form. So that shows you the interconnection of the Roman world and possibly the ranging of the Roman army, and also potentially where the Roman legionaries are coming from. So we've got a wide variety. And of course, actually, in the end, the Irish who served in the Roman army will have returned as Roman citizens. These men who appeared back, who have served, maybe if any of them wanted to go home after their service, now a lot of them probably just stayed where they were. They will have arrived back in Ireland thoroughly Romanized. That is what the Roman army, that was part of the service in the Roman army was to do, was to make these men Roman, and therefore they would take the Roman culture back with them, and then they would Romanize the people at home. Just diminishing returns over time, it helps, but yeah, the Romans, the Irish who went home will have, a lot of them might have considered themselves Roman as well as Irish.
I think we could go on with this discussion. I'm very, as a very factual, just quick thing. You see the coins from the hoard that are in the Ulster Museum, are they out on display all the time? Are they out like on permanent display? No.
Unfortunately not. I don't know why. They did have it, there was a travelling, somebody went, so it was just called hoards, and they brought out their own coins, and they've had them cleaned. I don't know why they're not permanently on display.
So everyone in the room.
Yes, write letters to the Ulster Museum. Nicely, can I see?
I just wondered if we would be able to see them, but hopefully, hopefully we will at some point.
Because I will say there is a gap for it, because when you walk through the Ulster Museum, there's bits. It's like 1st century BC Celtic Ireland in inverted commas, and then it just jumps to St. Patrick. So there's a gap. You could easily just put these 30 coins on display.
I'm seeing a job for canning here as well. Well, huge thanks for such an interesting and engaging talk, Peter. Peter Crawford, our speaker for today. Thank you very much.